Greetings there, everybody. It's your boy Gleekon here again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. On our last episode, we continued Cycle of Hatred, the novel. And we saw that Burning Blade. They're just continuing to push things along, opening up the events of Classic by building tensions, this time orcs versus humans. So the same, but different. Different, but the same. We last read on our aside thing, we looked at the different types of races and classes that you could be in the Dungeons and Dragons Warcraft. We're going to keep looking through this again, just for the sake of thoroughness and for any intrigue. Now, we're going to do chapter 3 of that right now, of the Warcraft role-playing game, the Dungeons and Dragons version. So this is the adventuring chapter. Honestly, this is probably going to be one of the more boring, so we're really going to just skim over it, because this is really the meat and potatoes of the rules of how to conduct your campaign within the Dungeons and Dragons setting. So we'll have some flavor text and stuff, but stay a while and listen as we do chapter 3, adventuring, and we'll see. So you do get to have an affiliation, which is a big difference for World of Warcraft, but notice that there's not alignment. We've had no discussion of alignment. I guess alignment doesn't differ from Dungeons and Dragons thus far. Okay, so let's just look at this dark gray, and we'll see how we go if we feel like reading anything further about affiliation. It says certain realities in the grim world of Warcraft notice that, World of Warcraft, are a part of the characters' lives regardless of affiliation. Heroes on both sides will face danger, adventure, and excitement. They will cross swords with members of the opposing faction and even with members of their own affiliation. After all, just because two people have a common allegiance does not mean they share the same goals and beliefs. The lands of Kalimdor are primitive and largely unknown. Discovery and exploration are more important for the Alliance than for the Horde. Native creatures of the land, including centaur, harpies, gnolls, trolls, and so on, are hostile and seldom care about their foes' affiliation. Though the Burning Legion and the forces of the Dread Scourge were shattered in the Third War, the pieces remain. Undead creatures, necromancers, and fearsome demons stalk the land. Orcs and night elves suffered corruption at the hands of the Burning Legion, leaving depraved satyrs and corrupted ancients of Ashenvale to threaten all within their reach. Moreover, the threat of a new enemy, the mysterious Naga, looms forbiddingly over the world. So we are getting into it's like they knew that the Frozen Throne was made, but it wasn't quite released yet or something, or there were some patches. I don't know, but it seems like there's snippets of the Frozen Throne that are touched upon. Okay, so you choose your affiliation, and it says it's largely determined by your racial distinction, but it's not absolute. Here are some bonuses. The Alliance has these things are basically like opinion scales. The larger the number, the worse off it is. So the Alliance has a little bit of a disadvantage against the Horde and a small one against Independence. The flip side of that for the Horde. The Burning Legion has huge disadvantages for the Alliance and Horde, but only slight ones against the Scourge and big ones against Independent. Scourge has pretty much the same, just flipped with the Burning Legion, whereas Independents just have slight, tiny disadvantages against Alliance and Horde, but for the most part, they're neutral against everything. Let's just kind of glance at what the Alliance and Horde means. If you're a member of the Alliance, your allies are plentiful and varied. You can count associates among the ranks of the humans, dwarves, night elves, high elves, and half elves. So notably, what are absent are gnomes. They're not discussed in this, which is an interesting oversight, because they could easily be included. And high elves, which will fade out, and half elves don't exist. Your leadership is strong but divided. Jaina Proudmoore, Tyrande Whisperwind, and Malfurion Stormrage are able leaders and command respect, but tension among the Alliance factions remains. The Alliance is based on the storm-swept island of Theramore off the coast of Kalimdor. So we know both that seat of power will shift to Stormwind before Classic begins, and that leadership will become less fractioned and unite under King Varian. With so many races lumped together, the Alliance is unsurprisingly rife with internal friction. High elves are often aloof and become alienated from others, most notably from the night elves, who see them as corrupt victims of their thirst for arcane magic. High elves struggle for acceptance, dwarves are obsessed with their recently discovered heritage, and humans must cope with the decimation of their most powerful empires. These relationships suffer further strain since few in the Alliance have land to call their own. The continent of Kalandor offers a new beginning, but the past lies in ruins. Yeah, and that's just something that has to happen too. There have to. This is neat because it's exposing to us the things that do still have to be tied up in a bow, in order for us to get to Classic. Alliance, as of Warcraft 3, they are a fractured, shattered realm. We're just going to start skimming because this is only of minimal importance to me. But the leadership of the Horde is Thrall and Karen Bloodhoof. Notice they are leaving out the trolls. So I don't know why. Maybe because in Dungeons and Dragons, trolls are so distinct. They just decided to not deal with it. I don't know, but they included goblins. So it's very interesting, some of the decisions, because the trolls, they are, by Warcraft 3, there are troll leaders and there are troll people that are there to help. So odd that they decided to just completely obliterate them. Independent people, they just are giving that to the goblins of Ratchet. We don't see a leader, and there weren't really that many named goblins until the Frozen Throne. And what's cool is that you can change sides. I think that's something that's cool that I talked about on a couple episodes ago. Okay, so there are different faiths, different from Dungeons and Dragons, but still there are some distinctions. There are those that worship the Holy Light, the three virtues. So we'll look and see what those are. Who worships the three virtues? I don't know about this. Those who practice the light focus their efforts on developing the three virtues of respect, tenacity, and compassion. Each virtue is further divided into a principle and a lesson. We'll look at those in just a second. Every creature that has feelings shares the same kind of connection between self and world that you do. Okay, so they're just kind of explaining the concept of what the light is. This is not something that is got into very much. The actual dogma of what the religion for the light is. So this is probably one of the only areas where this is gotten into. I guess we'll read it. Yes, it's the Holy Light's not a religion, it is a philosophy. For those who understand the Holy Light, faith is a matter of practice rather than worship. The fundamental concept of the Holy Light is that feeling, both emotional and physical senses. It's the evidence of the connection between the self and the universe. The Holy Light teaches that once you acknowledge the connection between yourself and the rest of the world, you must acknowledge your health and happiness are also connected to that of the world. If you wish to be happy, you must try to make the rest of the world happy. If you open yourself up to the beauties of the world, you can unlock your own inner beauty. If you give yourself over to despair, then you diminish the rest of existence. The Holy Light is the energy of the soul lighting up the world around it. So this is definitely them waxing philosophical. I don't know what to think of this. I'd have to see some other evidence in Warcraft lore for me to start to treat this as anything other than really just an off-topic discussion of the ideas that go along with the religion. I really think it's a purposeful move by Blizzard to not get so far into the actual, like, what are the rules, what are the tenets, what are the philosophies, what's the belief system behind the Holy Light, behind the three virtues, other than just using catchwords like respect, tenacity, compassion, retribution, things like that. Since a night elf, orc, or tauren even considering the values of the Holy Light is almost unheard of. Okay, maybe. But we know the night elves worship it in some ways. Orcs, I think, recently, as of Dragonflight, can. The tauren, yeah, I guess they do it differently. So it says the principle of respect. Each thing has its own connection to the world. The lesson of respect: do not harm what you would value as if it were yours. The principle of tenacity: the world is too large to be remade in a day. The lesson of tenacity: perseverance creates strength. The principle of compassion: you accomplish more brightening the lives of others than your own. The lesson of compassion: give aid freely, but do not diminish the one who receives it. So the holy light has the three virtues. It has worship of the light, which has the Church of the Light, which is true, and the Knights of the Silver Hand. Okay, and the Knights of the Silver Hand, they've been around since Warcraft 2. It's the organization of paladin warriors. They talk about Uther Lightbringer here. They talk about Arthas being converted into one of its enemies. Light triumphed over darkness in the Third War. But the paladins cannot forget Arthas' betrayal. The Burning Legion, they hunt down the undead in the Burning Legion. Yeah, and that's true. Paladins still have things that focus on damage against undead and demons. And so do paladins in Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, there's also shamanism and nature worship. The orcs, tauren, and night elves, because they can be druids and shaman. And that's true. We're not going to get too much into that. The orcs do not share the steady faith of tauren and night elves, because they have so much touch to nature. They can become druids, but they can become shamans. So do trolls. I believe trolls have always been able to be shamans as well. Okay, the mystery of the makers. This is kind of something that I think that's newish as far as when this was written. And I know there are things in World of Warcraft. I guess I don't know some of the lore, because Bran was trying to explore some things too. So I don't know how much of this was already in the works. Was it Bran? Whoever it was that taught Arthas. So I'm hazy on how original this is as illuminating the importance of the makers. If this is one of the first things, or if this is something that I'm just kind of glossing over in some of the other books we've recently read and Warcraft 3. But yeah, this is basically just summing up that the dwarves are realizing they have something called a progenitor race. It says the dwarves' practical nature does not lend itself to blind worship of a progenitor race, regardless of how compelling the evidence may be. They rely on measurements, mathematics, and the works of their hands. Rather than taking the measure of their creator's own faith, they've embarked on a mammoth investigation of their past, which is going to be interesting for the Explorers League. Yeah, but they're realizing that the Titans are their makers, possibly. And then we have the Burning Legion that are still out there. And we know, because in the book we're reading right now, they have formed the Burning Blade, and they have gotten mortal followers. Here we have evil satyr. There are demon cultists. It says most are insane. I don't know that that's true. They're supposed to kill a small child every 21 days at midnight. So that's something that has been taken away. So that's maybe adventure hooks right there, because I don't think that holds. We'll have to see if we ever hear anything about that again. But this is also neat to kind of see like some of the ideas that they're just sort of spitballing out there. It says, dangerous as the mad servants can be, they're at least easier to spot than the depraved ones. And that's kind of who we read about, I guess, one of the more depraved ones. The mind of the cunning ilk is more bent than shattered. These people enjoy inflicting pain and suffering on others. So we basically have varying degrees of insanity and evil by people that have been corrupted by the Burning Legion. And what's interesting is that here we're already having this idea of people on Earth, a whole faction that serve the Burning Legion. This is an early concept for the Burning Blade. And we have the Shadow Council. I guess there's still little trickles of that left out there, but there's really not that much. We do know that they stay and exist somewhat, because there is a Warlocks and the Shadow Council. They exist in World of Warcraft, and they still kind of, even though they're in that dark underground region of Orgrimmar, underneath the drag or whatever it's called. They still do. They're never fully wiped out. We have the Scourge here. The Scourge are just a mindless thing, but at this point in time, before the Frozen Throne, they are still being driven by the Lich King. Although now they're independent from the Burning Legion. All right, so this will be the more interesting part. Those are the factions, and it's reductive, so I don't love that because they don't include everything. There's a few snippets here and there. I just don't want to spend, 2 hours, whatever, reading about all that stuff with you guys. I just kind of wanted to look at it. But here, there might be some neat materials or techniques or gear that we can see flash later on in the game. So gunpowder, that takes less of a role. Sure, it's talked about, but it's not really a crafting material. Dragonhide, yeah, I think so. Darkwood, I don't know. Adamantine and Mithril, those do come, although Goblin and Human, I think it's interesting that they're separating that. And Thorium and Arcanite, those do still exist. Tauren don't use really metal like that. So we have Arcanite, and we'll have to just watch and see where that comes from, because it sounds very familiar, so I think it's in the World of Warcraft universe. Dragonhide, pretty sure it exists. Thorium, 100%. I don't know if thorium is something that exists like scientifically in the real world. I'm not 100% sure. But I feel like I've heard of it before, and it would be interesting that they just, you know what, when you do the weapon upgrades in Warcraft 3, you can get like thorium upgrades and dragonhide and stuff like that. So that may be Arcanite. So that's probably where they're pulling these from. Now, whether they exist beyond that, it's interesting, but that's neat that they're pulling those materials from those upgrade trees from Warcraft 3. The use of firearms is cool, but I like how that's a big thing to add into Dungeons and Dragons, because most Dungeons and Dragons campaigns don't have that. They do have blunderbuss, and here's mortar shells. That's cool because that's a big part of Warcraft 3, and they have different ammunitions. These are all, when you're rolling each dice for weapons, this is more important to figure out the logistics of all this. Bombs, grenades, Orcish Claws of Attack. Obviously, that's one of the main equipments we had in Warcraft 3. Flintlock pistols, Tauren halberds. Those look really cool. Dwarven tossing hammers, long rifles, moon glides. Those are awesome. They can gain feats to ricochet them, which the large ones do. So why not? That's cool. Mortars, the Tauren totems. It's pretty cool. Big bludgeons. Basically like probably Maul type stats. Warblades. That's like the samurai swords kind of that the blade masters use. And here's all the D&D stats. So pause it and look at it if you want, or go ahead and Google the Warcraft role-playing game campaign setting if you want these specific D&D stats for all of them. I do like how the Claws of Attack, Orcish Claws of Attack, have extra crit chance and damage. They can shred, and there's some explosive weapons. And these are cool that we have all these pictures as well. It's pretty neat. Yeah, there's that Warblade. Okay, so there's Goblin Army Knife. That actually, I don't know if they keep a Goblin one or if there's Gnomish, if it switches over to Gnomish, but that's an engineering tool. The Gyro Parasol. I don't know. There are floating parasols you can get in Shadowlands, but I'm not sure. Pulley gun. There is a rogue kind of grappling hook gun. Steam hammer. Don't know if you can build that. There's the Goblin Army Knife. Yeah, so we would just have a Gnomish one. Goblin Mine Shoes. There's like rocket boots and stuff. I don't know about Phlogiston Elixirs. Spider Silk Rope. So that's cool. There's some interesting little gear, and here's how you can start creating them. So the genesis of the engineering profession, perhaps, it might be having itself right here. They're just showing the DC's difficulty classes. If you don't play Dungeons and Dragons, just the things you have to roll to create a 200 DC world-changing development, an item that blows up a mountain or destroys a whole species. It's crazy that's even on the table. Like somehow that could be created, happen. Okay, and they're just giving all the steps. So this whole, they really are putting in the work to create an engineering type of class. So that's pretty neat. And it makes me think that the concept of building and crafting and professions is percolating. And I have no evidence to the contrary that this is where it all began and where those things that many of us love about World of Warcraft began here. Continuing to upgrade, building a flying machine. That's cool. And engineers can build those. So let's look at some magic items. These are probably ripped mostly from Warcraft 3 or beyond. Goblin landmines, that's Warcraft 3. Storm hammers, that's from Warcraft 2 and beyond. Vampiric rune blades, that's kind of cool. Warcraft 3 comes from, they're not called that, but sure, Arthas has one. The Potion of Invulnerability, mana, greater mana, those all come out of Warcraft 3. Cloak of Flames, Gloves of Celerity, those are both also from Warcraft 3. So that's cool how you've taken to, and like from the flip side, like in Warcraft 3, you have Gauntlets of Ogre Strength. Well, that's ripped right from Dungeons and Dragons. So there's definitely some overlap coming between these two things. All right, so like I said, kind of a little bit dry. Just neat to see some of the overlap and how they're taking it from Warcraft 3. I would say the most interesting thing out of all of that would be if we really wanted to go back and read the philosophies of that religion. There could be some meat on that bone, but it's also dry rulebook material type of stuff. So I don't want to spend too many minutes going after it, but look it up or go back and pause and you can read it on the screen here. If you're interested in that, I'm not particularly. I think it's fine, but I'm going to read this flavor text for us. So here we go. The Farseer's body was still cooling on the Spirit Lodge's lower platform when Elaine Glitterhelm managed to break into the inner sanctum. The warding seal was tough, but no match for the combination of arcane knowledge and brute force that the High Elf could bring to bear against any problem. Those same abilities had brought him this far, into the Spirit Lodge itself. A glib tongue and a passing knowledge of mystic theory had gained him access to the Orc Farseer in the first place. Brute force came into play when it became clear that the Orc was unwilling to share his knowledge. A heavy candlestick, expertly and forcefully applied to the back of the head, left the Farseer face down in a pool of dark blood, and Elaine with full run of the place. Still, speed was of the essence. Surely some acolyte, shaman, or penitent would find the body in due time, and the hue and cry would be raised. Until that time, Elaine could ransack the sanctum and steal away those bits that could be utilized by or traded with his magical brethren. Moreover, if the stories Elaine had heard were true, the sanctum contained something else of greater value. Most of the items, of course, were junk to the High Elf's eyes. Dolls made of twisted cords, pinned with bits of cloth, carvings of ancient spirits or revered ancestors, shards of mithril, chunks of arcanite, pieces of thorium left from shattered weapons and broken dreams, pelts, hides, scales, and teeth of a mismatched menagerie of slain beasts used for purposes that Elaine could only dream of. In the back, however, among the litter and debris, was the prize that Elaine sought, a great book bound in the hide of a demon and secured with iron clasps, the Book of Khadgar. So he made his own book. Long ago and far away, there was more magic in the world, Elaine thought as he pulled the heavy volume from its hiding place. No, that's wrong. There's as much magic as there ever was. Yet there was once more magical knowledge than in current times, Elaine realized. Knowledge held by such powerful magi as Medivh, and within the great arcane halls of the violet citadel of the Kirin Tor at Dalaran. The wizard Khadgar grew up within the walls of the latter and served as the assistant and some say executioner of the former. Khadgar vanished utterly in a quest beyond the walls of the twisting nether, leaving behind only legends, lies, and a few precious artifacts, such as this tome. Elaine ran his hands over the tooled leather cover and allowed himself a satisfied grin. The goblin merchant who had stayed with the Farseer had learned of the book and its provenance and sold the information dearly to a comrade of Alan's, who in turn proposed that the two of them break in and make it their own. Alan figured that one could succeed as easily as two, and when his ally met an unfortunate fate, Alan sought out the orc spellcaster. The orc was friendly enough, but would not budge on giving up his possessions, so Alan had no choice but to budge the orc for the good of all. So much was lost when Dalaran fell, Alan mourned. So much knowledge was burned by the undead and trampled beneath their bony feet. The common spells, those known to the warrior priests, sorceresses, and paladin warriors, still saw use, but so much else was lost. Even if this book contained not a single description of a spell, the very theory discussed in its pages would make Alan the most powerful mage, nay, say it, archmage in all of Kalimdor. Alan's lust so consumed him that he did not notice the dimming of the lights outside the sanctum, in the spirit lodge itself. The torches flickered and glittered out, and from their sconces arose thick, inky shadows. The shadows snaked around each other and formed into great solid clouds of blackness. In the heart of that darkness gleamed feral eyes, and wolf claws made of shadow tapped softly on the spirit lodge's wooden floors. Alan did not hear them until too late, and then he received only the chance to turn and let out the first words of a curse or spell or a prayer. Whatever the words Alan might have uttered, the fragment of the phrase was left unfinished as the feral spirits fed on his flesh. Too late did Alan Glitterhelm remember that not all of the guardians of magic were made of flesh and blood. Sounds like some spirit wolves. All right, so that primes us for the next time when we read, we will look at the spells and I think that'll be a little bit more neat because there won't be a lot of reading, but we will flip through and just glance at which spells made the cut to Warcraft, World of Warcraft. Okay, everybody, I thank you so much for watching, for listening. Sorry for a little bit of a dry one, but again, it's in the spirit of being thorough and to look at this as almost like a curiosity. It's pretty neat. This episode of Lore of Warcraft is done and in the pipe. 5 by 5.